Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the 16th edition of the NASSCOM DSCI Annual Information Security Summit 2021. We'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of our delegates, our speakers, sponsors, exhibitors, and partners who've joined us today on our today's program. We hope all of you are keeping safe and healthy during this time of the pandemic and also, in fact, following proper uh, COVID behavior. Now, the annual Information Security Summit has had the privilege of being touted as a genuinely industry led cybersecurity conference. And the journey that was started by the summit over the past 15 years has, in fact, been marked by increasingly compelling and relevant and futuristic content that gets shaped by multiple factors and contexts and has also endeavored to cover the entire spectrum of cybersecurity and data protection. Now, the 2021 edition shall also entail deliberations organized around the broad areas of cybersecurity leadership, enterprise security strategy, securing third parties and nth relations, security technology and architecture, digital risk management, cyber resilience, expectations and obligations around data protection, security consolidation, platformization, security operations excellence, and much, much more. And the 2021 edition AISS also brings to you sectoral meetups. We bring you sub summits and parallel track sessions. Fireside chats is what is on the agenda. We have short presentations, masterclasses, and a host of other formats that are going to be on the AISS 2021. The summit should also be, in fact, hosting the 11th edition of the Excellence Awards, which have been celebrating the noteworthy contributions of individuals and organizations to the subject and profession of cybersecurity and data protection. All the information on our sessions and schedule and speakers is available on the AISS 2021 website, and you may all refer to it for an enriching experience throughout the summit. And with that, we promise you 3 days of rich engagement and full of learning and meaningful discussions. Over the next 3 days, please feel free to share your feedback on social media using the official hashtag AISS 2021. And you can also mention DSCI underscore connect on Twitter. That's our Twitter handle at the rate DSCI underscore connect to tweet about the event, about your experience and your feedback. So without any further ado, we'd like to now begin our today's proceedings, and we'll now begin the inaugural session. I'd like to quickly invite Jatin Rishi, who's Senior Manager Events DSCI, to share with us a perspective of the next 3 days. Welcome, Jatin. Over to you.
Thank you, Samriddhi. Hello and a very warm welcome to all the delegates and dignitaries joining us from the different parts of globe for this edition of AISS 2021. We are really excited for the next 3 days and hope that it is a good learning experience for you as well. With deliberations are organized around the broad areas of cybersecurity leadership, enterprise security strategy, cyber resilience, expectation and obligation around data protection, and other key contours around the security ecosystem. There'll be senior leaders from almost all technology giants in industry. By virtue of being an industry led conference, AISS will witness 200 plus speakers deliberate on topical cybersecurity centric themes spanning across 75 plus sessions, and technology developments in the cyberspace will get showcased by the 35 industry partners, supported by 43 sponsors, partners, and exhibitors from all facets of the IT industry. You will also experience deep dive. You would have experienced by now the deep dive workshops being hosted by the security players across the 3 days on the topical subjects. And some of our major highlights will be the DSA Excellence Awards, Innovation Box, and Forensic Sub Summit. That would be a congregation of leading experts in the digital forensics and cybercrime investigation as we trek ahead. As a precursor to AISS, on December 14th, which is just yesterday, we hosted the DSCI EY Hackathon and saw an overwhelming response from over 400 participants and 245 teams from enterprise and academia across the country. The winner of the hackathon will be announced at the DSCI Excellence Awards on December 16th evening, hence stay tuned for that as well. In addition to this, with the objective of developing women leaders in the realm of cybersecurity, DSCI, Target, and EWF, which is Executive Women's Forum, hosted a closed door workshop. In this program, the executive gained clarity on the barriers derailing them and developed strategies to overcome the same for a robust and inclusive ecosystem. With this, I wish you all the luck for the learning experience which we have in store for you and hope that you find the discussions, deliberations, and contexts meaningful in the course of 3 days. Happy learning. Can I request the team to play the official AISS launch video.
Well, thank you, Jatin. And with that, we kickstart the 16th edition of the AISS 2021. It's time for me to now invite Ms. Rama Vedashri, the Chief Executive Officer at the Data Security Council of India, for a welcome note.
Thank you, Samriddhi, and thank you, Jatin, for really sharing the insights on what is in store for us for the next 3 days starting today. Yeah, welcome, everyone, all the delegates who are joining us from India and other parts of the world, all the speakers who have been supporting us year on year, subject matter experts from various verticals, security industry, services company, banking sector, oil and gas, academia, government. I mean, there's so many of these sectors who join us year on year as speakers to share their insights and their rich experiences. And of course, all the industry members who partner with us in helping us host AISs year on year, and of course, bring their senior leadership, their technology specialists to come and uh, partner with us in many of the master classes, workshops, and also all the panels that we do throughout the 3 days. Congratulations to those who participated in the hackathon yesterday. I think the winners were announced and they will be felicitated at the award ceremony tomorrow. And also for all the women senior leaders and women leaders in cybersecurity privacy domain who joined us yesterday in the Executive Women's Forum. It's a leadership development initiative of women leaders that we had undertaken in partnership with Target. So thank you all for joining us. I particularly, before I start my inaugural address, I wanted to particularly thank everybody in the security industry, whether it is services, products, global companies, and the CISO and the privacy leaders and their teams who have partnered on every initiative and program of DSCI in this year 2021. So many of you all, despite all the challenges on a personal front and the critical workloads that cybersecurity professionals have had in the year, you all have taken time to partner with us, deliver sessions, mentor startups, come on board as jury members for several of our challenges. The amount of time that you've given, even in sometimes reviewing our contributing to our threat intelligence advisory, the amount of time that you commit to DSCI, my team and I are would like to express our gratitude at the start of this first edition of 2020 of AISs in this new decade. Uh, what we have seen, I would try to focus on the trends that we have witnessed in the year and what is it that we are seeing as the evolving role of the CISO, and what are we seeing as the evolving role of the board and board's attention to cyber risk, and what are some challenges particularly for the security industry and the academic researchers in this domain, particularly with the pervasive adoption of public cloud, and also the future that is staring at us in terms of the future of quantum, and how is it probably going to really challenge every security technologist and user of technology on online services. What would be the shape of securing online services? This is what I would focus on in my session. And then my senior colleague and our chairman, Mr. Rajendra Pawar, would be joining me. Thank you, Raji, for joining us in the inaugural of AISS 2021. We were to have Dr. Rajesh Pant, but on some urgent mission, he is traveling to the US, so he could not join us today. Otherwise, we would have loved to have him and hear his insights at a national and government level. What are some trends that we have witnessed over the last 1 year, or maybe I would say 2 years, and what is shaping the role of the CISO and the priorities, and of course the challenges of the CISO, and how can the security technology and services industry scale up to support our enterprise customers and governments and every customer, right? So we have definitely seen a pervasive digitalization across businesses of all sizes and shapes, and most importantly, adoption of digital across various data of the demographics, right? Whether it is rural, urban, tier one, tier two, across all the demographics, we have seen expansive digitalization and adoption of digital technologies. And whenever we look at this digitization strategy, I think generating value not just for your employees and consumers, but looking at how is digital going to impact the way you engage with partners, with suppliers, with regulators, with government bodies. All of this has really witnessed a sea change in the last couple of years. While I think our industry and CISOs and security industry players have played a phenomenal role at the work from at home at scale, we still need to be totally prepared for this, the off used word, at the risk of sounding making it a cliche, the new normal, because it's still believed that at least 200 to 300 million people will continue to work in a remote or a work from home way. That's the prediction for the near term that we are seeing from all the analysts. So are we really, as we expand the digital footprint of the enterprise and enterprise networks go borderless, have we still completely got our arms around the risks that we have opened up, and are the technology and services scaling up to meet those kind of risks? I think that is something that we have done a great job in the last 1.5 years, but there is still more risks and challenges that we as a cybersecurity privacy community or leadership need to be able to address. We are seeing that increasingly any product or service that a business or even a government is now thinking of, it is enabled and enriched by data, and it is online and maybe on the mobile first and a cloud first is something that we are beginning to see. And when we look at this kind of a footprint, the role of the CISO, where the CISO was always somebody who had a technical risk mitigation role, right? In the new landscape where digital has got expanded, probably, I mean, it is told that decades of digitization has probably happened in a couple of years, starting the outbreak of COVID. We are looking at the CISO's role being evolving from being a technical risk mitigation leader to, are they integrating with the business strategy of the enterprise of the organization that they represent, and are they driving the digital growth strategy, digital transformation agenda, which is tightly linked to the business growth agenda of that entity, right? So the CISO's role is getting challenged. We have seen that it is not an exaggeration to say that there are two professional communities who were severely challenged since the outbreak of the pandemic. One is the healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, and all the healthcare professionals. And the second, I think it's not an exaggeration to say, the other community which was severely challenged during this health crisis, during almost a humanitarian crisis, is the cyber professionals and the cyber leaders of every organization at a country level and at a company level, right? So we are now beginning to see the board's attention to cyber changing worldwide. When we see the reports of the way boards are engaging, increasingly, is it happening across every entity? No, but increasingly worldwide, and at least in all the large enterprises in the critical information infrastructure sectors, whether it's oil and gas, banking, power, ITS, that we are well engaged with. We see the board's attention to cyber. At least there is a designated committee or a board member with that kind of expertise helping assess and manage the cyber risk. CISOs are very closely engaging with the boards. But one challenge that we see is it is still not happening across the board. We are beginning to see the regulator attention not just to cyber security breaches, but also looking at the overall data protection and privacy, and making boards or a CEO and CXOs accountable for it. That kind of accountability is taking the attention to cyber to the next level compared to a compliance oriented approach to cyber risk. One point we are seeing in maybe still happening only in a few dozen enterprises or a handful of enterprises. Uh, Attention to cyber and inviting the CISO to a new digital strategy of the company or the digitization agenda. What used to be a really an afterthought, and cybersecurity teams were expected to plug the gaps after a rollout has happened. Now we are beginning to see, at least in majority of the larger enterprises, where CISO is part of the decision making of a new digital program. Is it happening across all? No, that is, I think, the collective challenge for us in DSCI and the overall cyber privacy community. How can the CISO be integrated with a new digital program or a new digital service or a new online platform that a company or a government entity is rolling out? I think we still have some work to go, but we do see a significant paradigm shift that is happening there. At least we see quite many of the mature CISOs and some enterprises beginning to differentiate between cyber threats and cyber risk. I think there is a nuanced difference which needs to be understood, particularly at a CEO and a board level. I think that we have given a lot of attention to cyber threats, which is the technical threats in terms of vulnerabilities, phishing, ransomware attacks, versus cyber risk, which is the overall enterprise business risk, risk for the business's resilience, risk for reputation. How do we assess the while we deal with the cyber threats, which is extremely important? How do we up the game at a management level, right from board, CEO, and CISO, to be able to deal with the cyber risk? And how do we force those kind of partnerships with the technology industry, with regulators, or with nodal agencies to be able to deal? They both are different. I think there has been a lot of attention from the CISO on the cyber threat and making those kind of investments. But are we doing enough to be able to assess the real cyber risk at a board and a CEO level? I think that is something that is beginning to happen. And I'm sure that with the way digitization is happening and the way where now we are no longer, I don't think it's any longer a buzzword to say we are a technology led business. I think technology is driving the business across all verticals and sizes. That's what I mean. I started my address with that. We are beginning to see that kind of attention, and one point that we see is, are the CISO scaling up? I think there's a lot of focus on the leadership training and scaling up of the CISO, and being part of driving the digitization agenda, or enabling or securing the digitization agenda of the enterprise. It needs to happen more, and we do see a significant trend in that direction. Another point that I would bring about is the way we had done investments in cyber was always probably a percentage of the technology spend in the company. That's the way it has happened worldwide. But I think increasingly the investments in cyber technology choices and early adoptions of emerging technologies that is happening. We are looking at how we link investments in cyber both from a people, process, and particularly technology perspective. Is how is it tightly linked to the business risks of a new digital initiative, and link it to cyber. And it looks like increasingly we are seeing boards being open to an evolving budgeting cycle for cyber, and not a one time or a once in 3 years or a once in 1 year. We are beginning to see that trends worldwide, and we do see, as we engage with CISOs, that happening in the last couple of years, particularly in the last 1 year. Another point that we see is the kind of regulatory and government attention. I think that's a conversation that is happening across every prime minister, president's office, and their national institutions. Some of us are familiar, like a Department of Justice in the US, which usually works on competition and other trade policies and fraud and things like that. They'd actually created a task force to deal with ransomware at that level, where they almost said that ransomware needs to be dealt at the same scale of terrorism, right? And the task force is looking at how do we address and mitigate the risks of ransomware, which became. So I'm just trying to see the scale at which attention of government and regulators is continuously changing, and of course the way the boards, at least now we see most large enterprises boards in their quarterly board meetings or quarterly review, cyber getting reviewed, or there is at least a committee of the board which is doing that. And we believe that is going to significantly empower the CIO in terms of their leadership role, their ability to drive and partner with the digitization strategy. We've always seen CISO engaged more with the legal, risk, and IT teams, but now we are beginning to see CISOs having to engage with the marketing, product team, services, any new service design that's happening. And we see that quite a bit of it, at least in the BFSI sector and, of course, in the ITS sector. One, as of course, for the technology industry, this is when you look at the security services and products, the fact that cloud became mainstream, I think it's no longer just a projection or a hype. It has got really mainstream, particularly public cloud adoption. Here we see some significant challenges both for user enterprises and for us as providers, where when we look at public cloud adoption, the architectures, the solution, the apps that were developed for an on-premise environment versus public cloud, are we revisiting that architecture? What are we doing? And in terms of, because unless we get our cloud adoption strategy, approach, and operationalization right, I think there would be a significant showstopper for digital adoption across every enterprise. And particularly in cloud, we see this challenge where as more and more workloads are getting migrated to the cloud, public cloud, what is an interesting phenomenon that we have observed in the last year and a half is security services and products getting mainstreamed onto the cloud platform, and customers' acceptance to consume security technology stack and services, whether SOC on the cloud or any one of this on the cloud. In this, where we need to look at how do we, while I do understand there's a lot of innovation happening from the cloud service providers, from several startups in India that we are engaging with, which are engaged on, say, a cloud security solution, I think we still have a long way to go in terms of how do we define those kind of architectures and those policies. Are we looking at, while when we did it for enterprise applications, we've had all those processes in place where we had checks and balances and tests across all phases of the SDLC or the software development life cycle. But when we are doing it for the cloud, there's this new, there is this concept and framework that is coming as security, as as the code, right? So that even when a developer is developing a code, is it complying to the policies? Let's say you have a policy for identifying PII, and if the code that is being submitted, if it is does not comply to the policy, the code gets rejected, right? So there is a lot of these new frameworks. I think we have a lot of challenge in training our solution architects and our developers, and of course coming up with those cloud security solutions for very nuanced use cases, because I think public cloud adoption is something that we are seeing as a trend to stay, and will probably get accelerated year on year at a much faster pace for various kinds of workloads, right? In that case, how do we look at revisiting the way we develop and architect our solutions, and how do we build that kind of rigor so that the CISO is not stressed, or the CIO is not stressed to make a decision? Because no longer are we looking at cloud in terms of cost, or the agility or the speed to deploy. Those, I think, benefits are here, I mean, are well understood. But now we are looking at cloud as a way to come up with a completely new league of digital services to be able to reach your citizens, reach your consumers. There, I think we do have some work to do as a security services technology startups. to be able to reassure our CIOs and CISOs that they can really bet mission critical workloads on the cloud. And I'm happy that our National Center of Excellence and our cybersecurity COE in Hyderabad are putting little attention to those kind of use cases and that innovation and nurturing and growing those startups, and also partnering with many of the cloud service providers, because it's not just a question of getting your data classification right. I think that's definitely one challenge, but apart from all of that we do in terms of classifying our workloads and our data, what is it that we are doing when we are building apps for the cloud or we are migrating on-prem apps to the cloud? That is one thing that I would see, because I think the biggest trend that we have seen post pandemic is the public cloud adoption. The second one, probably what I wanted to touch upon, is the role of the board in looking at a comprehensive digital and cyber risk assessment strategy so that those two go hand in glove. I think we still don't see that happening the way it should be happening. So I think here the CEO's role, or the role in partnering with the CIO and the CISO organization and enabling them to make sure that anything that we do in digital is tightly linked with your cyber risk assessment and the mitigation strategy right from inception, because I don't think we have time to be able to do it later, because the hackers are smarter than us. While we are leveraging AI and ML for all the data innovation that is possible to grow our businesses, the hackers are doing a lot more in terms of launching attacks, leveraging the dark side of technology. So I think that integration is very, very important, particularly for all the security technologists and academia who are joining us at AISS. One thing that I wanted to leave as I wrap up is, I think 3-4 years back, or 4-5 years back, cloud and AI and ML were still buzzwords, whereas now we are seeing they're so mainstreamed in every business application. AI and ML, cloud particularly is another one. And AI ML, when we look at, there's a research report that we'll be publishing during AISS, when we have done a landscape of all our services companies and security startups and products, pretty much everybody's new offering is integrated or is built and architected over AI and ML, right? Whereas it has taken us 4-5 years to get them mainstreamed and harness the power and benefits of that technology. The same thing now at this point of time, maybe what is post quantum might look like science fiction to us, but it is not, given the number of services that, there are millions of users that are going online consuming maybe 200 300 content from 200 300 million websites, transacting on so many digital platforms including payment systems and banking and all those financial services platforms. So the post quantum world is something that we need to start thinking now. I don't think we have the kind of luxury of time cycles, where the way we have dealt with challenges of cloud or challenges with any other digital technology. Here, in the post quantum world, when encryption gets challenged severely, how are we making sure that we secure services online? And here we are also seeing that standards evolution, just like we are seeing that in IoT, standards evolution has not kept pace with the innovation on the technology sides or the devices side. We cannot afford to lose that momentum on the quantum side, because how do we secure online services in the post quantum world when encryption and the public key cryptography is going to get severely challenged? I think that's a challenge for us in the as technologists, as researchers in academia. And I do hope that NCOE team will work with academia and industry to give attention to this, and of course partner with organizations worldwide who are giving attention, because I think the challenges that we had in prioritizing and adopting cloud 4-5 years back, we've had some time to make those decisions and migrate, which probably got accelerated because of COVID. But I think when we are looking at the post quantum world and challenges to encryption, how do we secure our services online? The financial services industry would be impacted, everybody would be impacted, governments would be impacted. I think we need a lot more attention so that our we enable our customers to be prepared for that world, and academic collaboration and giving that attention. I think we need a lot more attention on that. So these are two, three key takeaways I wanted to leave with: the digitization, expansion, digital footprint, the evolving role of the CISO, where CISO is no longer a technology risk mitigation leader, but somebody who's going to tightly assess the cyber risk based on the digital footprint of the enterprise, whether it's the brand reputation, whether it's the financial losses, and all that holistic perspective, and not just from an availability or uptime of the service perspective. The changing role of the board, and why board needs to partner more with the CISO and the privacy teams to make sure that whenever a digital strategy or a digital program is crafted, cyber risk, I think cyber threats are well understood. There is enough technology to deal with, but to assess the cyber risk and look at for the security services and technology product industry, how do we do more on securing public cloud workloads and applications and users working, accessing services on the public cloud. And the second one is maybe we need to give a lot more attention to how do we work in the post quantum world on securing services online, when everything that we understood about encryption is likely to get challenged. And we are also beginning to see the CISO having to play the role of dealing with very fragmented regulations, geography level, sectoral level, even from a standards perspective. We know in quantum, maybe there is a country level standards that are happening. How do we do all of this is something that we need to focus on. So thank you for joining us. I do hope you will leverage all the sessions that our team has put together and share your insights, and do invite all your team members to join us at AISS and attend some of the technical deep dive sessions that we are doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Vedashri, for talking to all of us, for that great insight into the important initiatives that DSCI has been taking this year. And with that, I'm now going to move on to our next speaker. I'm going to invite Shri Rajendra S. Pawar, the chairman of DSCI, for his address.
Thank
Good
you.
morning.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Samrit. Thank you so
over to you,
much.
Ms.
Thank you. And once again, a very hearty welcome to all of you. Rama has given a very good, um, not just an oversight, but I would say a detail on the many, many issues that are confronting all of us in terms of cyber, but specifically on the initiatives, on the actions that we're taking and what more needs to be done. So I'd like to take just a few minutes to give the context for a moment, a bit on what happened in this year, and then a few minutes on where we are headed. So the context, I think from DSC's point of view, we, right from the time of inception and thereafter, we've looked at what is our mission. And the mission really has got sharpened over the years, but the mission now is at two levels. One is at a global level to achieve leadership in cyber security related services in the medium term, near to medium term, and in the medium term and beyond to look at the cyber security product sector to become dominant at a global level. That's one part of the mission. The second, of course, and perhaps I should have put it the other way around, is to make India cyber secure. Now, we are preparing a lot, but we keep hearing disturbing things from time to time. And I think it's accepted all over the world that in this field of cyber, the, the thieves are still ahead of the cops. So there's a lot of catching up to do. Now, in terms of vision, many of you would be remembering and were involved in the cybersecurity task force, which was formed in 2015 to achieve the mission that I talked about. And in the second half of 15 and throughout 2016, a very large number of people across all sections, from the government, from academia, from industry, users, were involved in formulating a kind of a roadmap for the cybersecurity industry. And this task force gave its report in 2016. And we had laid out a roadmap which talked about what this industry should become to be able to help India achieve its global aspirations on cyber and also its internal cybersecurity aspirations. And in that roadmap, uh, of course, the most measurable component is that what should be the size of operation on cyber at we do at a national level, because it points to the extent of activities which are going on. So we had said that by 2025, when the IT sector is expected to be 350 billion, the cyber sector should be 10% of it, should be close to 35 billion. We'd also estimated or made some calculation, should we say, that about 1 million professionals, cybersecurity professionals, would be involved in making this happen. So the dual agenda of a scale of operation of the industry and technology and startups and so on, and the scale of talent available to find solutions to the problem. And then the important insights that came out of this study, and I want to touch on just a couple of them. The first was there are three engines of growth, quite clearly. There is industry. When we look at industry, there are three components. There is the IT services companies, the Infosys, the Wipros, the HCLs, and so on. Then there are the startups, which is a new phenomenon, racing ahead very well. And then the global competency centers or multinationals who have put their captive capability to build cybersecurity products and services for their own use and their customers' use. But we learned a very important thing: that is not enough to build a strong industry. In the studies that we did of other countries which have moved ahead in cyber, Israel being a good example, US to a certain extent, Holland as a good example, UK to some extent, we found a very simple but important and critical architecture. And the architecture is that three players have to be working very closely for this sector to achieve anything meaningful. And those are, of course, the industry, and I talked about the three components of the industry. Academia, because a whole lot of new knowledge has to be generated. As I said, the thieves are ahead of the cops. We start responding to things that happen. We look at use cases coming out of incidents which have happened. So we are in a reactive mode. So academia has to be the frontier of creating, the fountainhead, should we say, of creating new knowledge. So industry, academia, and perhaps most importantly, government, not just for policy making, but for funding, as well as government as a customer. For us, each of us is a citizen of this country. So on all of these fronts, there is, I think, significant stuff happening. Rama has talked ably, and I'll comment on a bit of that when I look at the year gone by. On the state, on the role of government, we see a significant amount happening. I'll touch on it very briefly. The thing I want to talk about briefly also is about talent. Now, in addition to recognizing that talent causes things to happen and that we need to reach 1 million, I do want to say that there is very good progress. We are up to more than, I would say, 300,000 people, well on our way to reaching the 1 million, perhaps exceeding it by the time frame. But in addition to the talent which drives the day-to-day work of the industry, there are two other communities which we have focused on very significantly, and Rama alluded to them in part. One is the Chief Information Security Officers, the CISOs, and we have more than 200 CISOs who are very active, and a few other 100 who are in and out of being engaged with DSCI, and that's a task for us to look at. That's one large community which is engaging with the problem. The second, of course, is the CIOs. And the last couple of years have seen very active work, last year particularly, and I would say that we have now engaged about 500 people a little before last year, and then the cumulative stands at close to 600 CIOs across sectors, of which about 100 in the healthcare sector, particularly last year, year and a half, that's been a focus. So this is the second large pool of talent which is getting equipped because they're responsible for the information systems and they're getting equipped to cope with the risks and the problems therein. Now, looking at last year, and a few numbers here, but I do want to say that we've been tracking for the calendar year to align it to many of the international studies. But we also have some part of it, the GCCs, the Global Competency Centers, which report alongside the NASSCOM report by March end. So these figures are more or less accurate, but a more precise number comes out in April. But just to give you a heads up, the IT services component, which was 4.3 billion in 2019, crossed 8.5 billion this year, Jan to December. That's a 40% CAGR. The products category, which was a billion point 1.02 last year, crossed 1.37, which is a 35% growth this year over the previous year. And while GCC data will come in, we expect that they would have upward of 30% growth. And in 2020, it was 4.6 billion, so it should be crossing 6 billion this year. So approximately $16 billion is the size of this sector. And I have to remind people who are involved in CSTF, the Cybersecurity Task Force, that we estimated the size that time to be 3.5 billion. And we had assumed a certain growth rate. And we said if we achieve that growth rate, we'll cross 35 billion in the year 25-26. I think important to know that we are likely to cross that number at least 1 year ahead of time, if not 2 years ahead of time, because at 35 or 37% that we are ranging at right now, we're likely to cross this number in the next 2 years. DSCI does a very large number of things. I think Rama alluded to some of them. I think the engagement with government is a very important one. And I do want to mention that there are two dimensions to that engagement. One is that with the Ministry of IT, with METI, we have set up, and that's been going for a while, the National Center of Excellence, which has seen enormous growth last year. Many new projects, many new responsibilities, many new areas being studied, and many new startups being supported. So this is about the central work and the center and its involvement in the cybersecurity, and not to mention a very good and deep engagement with the National Cybersecurity Coordinator's Office, General Panth, we talked about him, and many others who are involved there. And we've been involved in running some multinational global operations with the government and for the government on cyber in the area of forensics with a number of countries. METI is also funded and is promising and to continue the funding for these grand challenges. We just had one recently. The top winner startup won an award of 1 crore rupees. And we're going to up that amount and up the numbers. And therefore, the government involvement, as we said, government and startups and industry is very tight. And that brings me to the third leg, which is academia. So we now have, I would say, a couple of dozen institutions getting engaged with DSCI. We want that number to cross 100 in the next year. Because academia is the fountainhead of knowledge. Academia is what will drive a very large number of startup activities. And so while they're already into operation, we have a number of projects going on with some institutions, but this is going to be a big priority area as we go forward. So finally, looking at a very inviting future. COVID, no COVID, this sector is set the benchmark for growth among all sectors within the IT industry at upward of 30-35% growth. And we expect that this will continue, maybe even go to higher levels. So I talked about the IT services part of the business is growing. More and more of our large players are getting active. More and more of our large players are building very strong capability. The global competency centers, many more international companies have thought it to be wise to set up their security operations out of India. And many parts of the country are now seeing these new initiatives happen. So this is another activity which is going at 30%, and we expect it to accelerate. And finally, the startups, which is where we see our future. Creation of IP, creation of absolutely cutting edge areas. And I think many of the areas that Rama talked about in terms of AI, ML, those are areas where we're seeing new companies come and set the agenda. For government, we have set up one center of excellence in Telangana. It's been through its learning curves, and now we are getting ready with the blue book or the let's say the rollout manual, which we will take state by state by state, because while cybersecurity at the center is in full speed, we have to make sure that every state also deals with its subjects, and many topics are state subjects, and it's subject to protect the citizens at the state level as well. And we expect that to be a big activity as well. So all in all, time for a lot more action than we've had even in the 2 COVID years. And I'm looking forward, like many of us at DSA are looking forward to the deliberations of these 3 days. They are becoming more and more active. We are identifying more and more capabilities and talents. And so I really want to wish this event all success. It's a very important event. Your role is very important. You're engaging, and your increasing engagement is very important. And so I wish all of you the very best in this event. Take your time to get engaged, take your time to make some good friends. Well, much less possible in this virtual mode, but you listen to many people and you can connect up over chat and so on. And most important is think of new ideas. We need all of that for this sector to grow at 35% and beyond. All the best to all of you, and thanks so much for this opportunity to express my views.